Hello everyone and welcome back. I'm Juhli Leman and I'm so glad you're here with me for another step in our journey of self-discovery. And now it is podcast number 5. This is about exploring our inner voices. In our last episode, we learned about managing triggers and dealing with suppressed anger. We discovered how our past experiences can rise up and influence the present moment, and how awareness helps us break free from those cycles. Today we are moving into another fascinating part of our inner world, and it is the voices within us. Let's start with what we mean by voices. When we say voices, we don't mean voices of other people, but our own. The conversations we can have with ourselves. Well, it's our inner dialogue. If we have ever paid attention, we note that self-talk isn't always one-dimensional. Sometimes it may be supportive, and at other times critical, and sometimes it feels like two parts of us are arguing. Then, for example, to imagine that we would like to relax with a piece of cake, what if one voice of us says, "Go ahead, you deserve it," but then there's another one that may whisper, "But you're trying to eat healthier." Both voices are ours, yet they are in opposition. These are our voices who talk to each other many times. And what can we make of that? Even if they are opposite to each other, they are our voices, coming from only ourselves. It is our nature of self-talk, which often reflects our current mindset. Yes, we can have very different mindsets at different times. For instance, when we are in a positive state, our words to ourselves are encouraging. But when we are feeling lower, that same inner dialogue can become harsh and critical and even hurtful at times. The difference between how we talk to others and how we talk to ourselves is quite striking. With others, we usually censor our words. But when we speak to ourselves, we often let the most negative voices run unchecked. We can now see how the constant stream of inner criticism can harm our sense of self-worth. What about these opposing voices? It seems that some voices warn, others push, and some encourage, and others criticize. So they don't always agree. For instance, one dialogue we could have with ourselves is, "I should exercise, but I'm tired. But I know if I don't do it, I will regret it later." So now we need to recognize that listening to this dialogue, we find that this isn't just one voice. It is more parts of us speaking up, and they can easily create some conflict. Interestingly, one voice often feels truer to our inner core, while another feels more adapted to social expectations. Because one is more authentic, while the other is on guard and shaped by the rules we learned growing up. We speak from different perspectives now, of having different desires, which may not always be good for us. But the one part of us which is more tuned into our true nature will know what is good for us. The explanation for this is that when we were children, we were open, curious, and playful, and we expressed ourselves quite freely. Over time, society introduced rules, judgments, and labels. Slowly we learned to hide parts of ourselves, and the free, joyful us became much quieter. But the adapted self grew stronger. The self is a version of us who tries to fit in, and so becomes our dominant voice in adulthood. But we completely ignored the other voice, the one who is trying to stay truer to us and true to our inner core. This one is reduced to only raising a faint whisper. We now call it the inner child, the one who did not have much chance to develop fully. And we may have heard about this expression, as we generally have realized that we sometimes are in that habit of ignoring parts of ourselves. So then, we now have our inner child versus the adapted one. So how do we work those two different voices? How do we work them? The goal is not to rid ourselves of the adapted self, but to integrate it with the authentic self. Now it is good to concentrate more on our neglected part here. One way to begin is with self-compassion. As soon as we notice our critical voice, we can do some thoughtful thinking. Would I speak this way to a close friend? So then why do I speak like this to myself? Yes, the adapted self is now the one we identify with. We now notice the conflicts that can show up at different times. We need to let our true self be heard. When we integrate the two selves, we create a balanced sense of self that is both responsible and authentic. When we practice self-compassion, we reduce the gap between the two selves. So we need to pay more attention to our dialogue so that we can recognize which voice we are presently using. To be more aware, it is necessary because sometimes we need to make decisions. And many times our adapted self will have much influence on that. We can always test ourselves and how much we may sabotage ourselves. This way we also realize the trouble we may get into when we are not honoring our neglected child. We need to improve our self-talk. We need to get away from our automatic language and be more vigilant. Our voice, of course the right one, will warn us to do the right thing. Also, when we are not honoring our neglected child, we will find ourselves with ailments. We will not know where they are coming from because we have hurt ourselves. Then our body will be affected because it also is asking to be loved, just as well as our psyche. Recognizing our true self will not be so easy because our two selves can easily confuse us when they create a conflict. Maybe in our body, and that will then make us tense and stressed. This in turn will help to create the negative mindset instead of helping us to create this mindset of ease. So we now need to go back to our exercises of reflection to bring everything into our awareness. We do so much automatically with little awareness, and that can get us into much trouble. So our main aim is to be careful and always look out for ourselves and find compassion for ourselves mainly. Then as a closing thought, we always need to be vigilant as to how we conduct ourselves to be able to stay true to our neglected self by honoring it more. Looking ahead, our next episode, which is podcast number 6, will be more about our mental well-being. and finding strategies for a more balanced mind. Also, by practicing mindfulness, it will help us to stay well, by reminding us of many possibilities we have to keep a positive mindset and stay in a state of ease.